What does it actually take to be rich in New Zealand? Not comfortable, not doing okay, but genuinely rich. Today, I'm going to show you the exact income you need to crack the top 10%, the top 5%, and the top 1% of Kiwi earners. Then I'm going to show you the number that matters far more than your salary, the wealth. And there's a twist waiting at the end, because the way New Zealanders actually become rich has very little to do with the size of their paycheck. So wherever you land on these numbers, stick with me, because the last part is the part that can actually change your life. First, let's be clear about something. There are two completely different ways to measure rich. There's what you earn, your income, and there's what you own, your wealth. Everything you have minus everything you owe. Most people only ever think about income, but as you'll see, the two tell very different stories. Just for context, the median individual income in New Zealand, counting everyone, is around $50,000, and for full-time workers, it's closer to $72,000. The median household's wealth, on the other hand, is $529,000. And here's an early clue about how wealth really works in this country. While the median household sits at $529,000, the average is nearly double that, just over $1 million. That gap exists because a relatively small number of very wealthy households drag the average way up. Hold those middle numbers in your head, because now we're going to climb to the top. Let's start with income. To crack into the top 25% of earners in this country, you need an individual income of around $110,000. That alone is already double the typical earner. To climb into the top 10%, you're looking at roughly $150,000 a year. Now here's the first reality check. $150,000 sounds like serious money, and it is. But remember what we said about housing. In Auckland, that top 10% income still only services a fairly ordinary mortgage on an average home. Being a high earner and feeling rich are not the same thing. To reach the top 5%, you need somewhere around $200,000. And the top 1%? This is where it gets murky, because the data sources genuinely disagree. Depending on whose numbers you use, the threshold to be a 1% earner sits somewhere between about $225,000 and $450,000 a year. What everyone agrees on is that the climb gets brutally steep right at the very top. The top 0.1%, the 1 in 1,000, are earning well over $1 million a year. And here's a clue that points straight to the twist coming up. Very few of those top earners are simply on a big salary. The biggest incomes in the country overwhelmingly belong to business owners, investors, and people who own a stake in something, not to employees collecting a paycheck, however large. That's not an accident, and by the end of this video, you'll see exactly why. But here's the problem with all of those income numbers, and it's a big one. Income is a leaky bucket. You can earn $250,000 a year, drive the European car, take the overseas holidays, and still own almost nothing because it all flows straight back out the door. A high salary is not wealth, it's just a bigger river flowing through your hands. And that's exactly why the truly useful question isn't how much do you earn, it's how much do you actually own. So let's look at the number that really defines rich in New Zealand, your net worth. Remember, the median Kiwi household is worth $529,000, and that's a figure that's jumped by a third in just 3 years, almost entirely because of rising house prices. Now let's climb. To be in the wealthiest 20% of households, the richest fifth of the country, the typical net worth is around $2.4 million, and the rough entry point sits near the $1 million mark. In fact, around 80% of New Zealanders have a net worth below $1 million, so simply crossing 7 figures puts you in rare company. If this is reshaping how you think about wealth, take a second and hit the like button. It genuinely helps more Kiwis find the channel. And the top 1%? The typical 1% household in New Zealand is worth around $11.5 million. That is 22 times the wealth of the average household. And it keeps going. The top 1 in 1,000 households are worth around 20 million and up, with a long tail stretching all the way out to a handful of billionaires. One more thing about wealth before we get to the real secret, because it explains so much. Wealth is built across a lifetime. The median individual under 35 has a net worth of only around $34,000, while someone aged 65 and over sits at around $424,000, and those 75 and over around $590,000. Wealth isn't usually won in a single moment, it's accumulated slowly, decade by decade. And the single biggest fork in that road is whether you own a home. During the property boom between 2021 and 2024, homeowners gained around $300,000 in wealth, while renters watched from the sidelines and gained nothing. One group's assets quietly grew while they slept. The other group's rent just went up. That single divide, owning versus renting, explains more about wealth in New Zealand than almost anything else. Now here's the twist I promised you, and it's the most important part of this entire video. How do the wealthy in New Zealand actually get rich? It is almost never the salary. It's what they own, and specifically how this country taxes what they own. Here's the key fact. Nearly half of all household wealth in New Zealand is tied up in property. For the average middle household, an enormous 92% of their entire net worth is just their own home. And remember the thread running through this whole channel. New Zealand has no general capital gains tax. So when those assets grow in value year after year, that growth is almost entirely tax-free. The wealthy aren't just earning more, they're holding appreciating, tax-free assets and letting them compound for decades. But there's a second layer most people miss. The wealthiest 20% don't only own homes. They also hold real investments. Around 18% of their assets sit in shares and other investments, while the typical middle household holds, in the words of one economist, basically nothing in stocks or bonds. So the rich own two engines, tax-free property and a real investment portfolio, while everyone else owns one engine at best and rents the rest. And to see how powerful that is, picture two people, one with $1 million in appreciating assets and one with very little. If both earn a 5% return, the asset owner gains $50,000 in a single year without lifting a finger, while the person with nothing to invest gains almost nothing. That gap doesn't just persist, it widens every single year, which is exactly how the wealthy pull further ahead. And here's a fact that should genuinely encourage you. By global standards, New Zealanders are wealthy. The country ranks among the top 5 in the world for median wealth per adult. And simply owning a mortgage-free home here puts you comfortably inside the richest slice of the entire planet. And that, finally, is the lever that actually matters for you, because it's something you can act on no matter what your income is. Becoming wealthy in this country isn't really about chasing a top 1% salary. It's about quietly shifting from earning and spending to owning assets, and then letting New Zealand's tax-free system do the heavy lifting over time. That means getting onto the property ladder when you can, even in a cheaper region, as we've talked about before. It means treating your Kiwi saver as a real wealth engine in a growth fund, not a sleepy default one. And it means owning a slice of the share market rather than leaving everything in cash. None of those require a $200,000 income. They require you to think like the wealthy do, in terms of assets, not just salary. So let's bring it all together. To be a top earner in New Zealand, you're looking at around $150,000 for the top 10%, roughly $200,000 for the top 5, and anywhere from $225,000 to $450,000 to crack the top 1%. But income is the leaky bucket. Real wealth is the median household at $529,000, the top 20% at around $2.4 million, and the top 1% at $11.5 million. And the real secret hiding in all of it is this: the wealthy get there by owning tax-free, appreciating assets, not by earning a giant salary. Wherever you sit today, that path is open to you. And remember, comparison is the thief of joy. The only scoreboard that truly matters is you versus where you were a year ago. So start building, one asset at a time. If this video gave you a clearer picture of what rich really means here, do me a favor and hit like, subscribe if you're not already, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next one.